Poppy, say hello. Come on. Look at the camera. Look at the camera. Say hello to everybody. Oh, no. You're camera shy. Are you getting off? Are you getting off then? Oh, okay. You're sitting there. Alrighty then. Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today is the case of Sherri Papini. It's a strange one, to say the least. This was suggested by CD, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions you guys have, and of course if you have any more, please do let me know. But for now, let's just get into this one. Sherri Papini was born on the 12th of June in 1982 to her mother Loretta and Richard, her father. She was raised in Shasta County, that's a bit of a mouthful, in California with her sister. Now, she basically met a guy in 7th grade. This guy was called Keith, right? And, well, that's not where it ends with Keith, but Sherri actually ended up getting married to someone at some point, and then they sadly did end up getting divorced, and then later on in life, not sure how it happened, but she then met up again with Keith. And Keith and Sherri decided that they wanted to get married. You know, they hit it off, they got in a relationship. And then in 2009, they got hitched. They began their family together. They ended up having 2 children, Violet and Tyler. And by all accounts, from the outside looking in, and from Keith's point of view too, they were just a happy, loving family. Sherri was described as a really good mom. She adored her children. She would do anything for them. Keith was he worked full time, but there was never any issues. So it seems between the two, you know, they were just this one big happy family. Also, Keith thought. And you're probably wondering, if you don't know this case, why I keep saying that, but you will find out, trust me. So let's jump to the 2nd of November in 2016. Keith had gone to work. The kids had been dropped off at daycare, and Sherri had gone out for a normal run. Now, apparently she just got back into jogging or something, and so she went out with her phone, earphones, and went on this jog, her normal route. That was that. Keith gets home later from work. He expects to find Sherri there with the children in the house, and she's not there, neither are the kids. So he's thinking, you know, bit odd. So what he does is, because he's wondering where she is, he decides to ring the daycare and ask what time Sherri picked the children up. Well, they replied that the children had not been picked up by Sherri, they were still there. Straight away, that panicked Keith, obviously, because why on earth had this devoted mother not picked up their children? It was strange. So he got really worried. So what he did is he got out his phone and he went on the Find My iPhone app and he went to locate Sherri's phone. So it leads him to the corner of Sunset Drive and the corner of like an Oregon trail. And he finds on the floor Sherri's phone with headphones still attached and some hair tangled within them. Of course, this is not right, so he immediately rings the police and reports his wife as missing. Police come out immediately. They're doing door-to-door inquiries. They're really trying their very best to find Sherri and wonder what what happened to her. And so they actually spoke to somebody who had seen Sherri doing her normal jog at about 2 p.m. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But obviously she didn't come back home after that jog. So the police were doing appeals. Everyone was spreading the news. They did a massive, intensive search for Sherri. They put out posters and everything for her. The media obviously caught hold of it and that spread it even further, and she was just all over the news. Which is obviously a good thing. You want to spread out the news. You want to try and get this person home. Maybe somebody out there knows something and they didn't know they knew until it, you know, was on the news. And so everyone was looking for Sherri, basically. Time passed by. Volunteers were all sort of doing search parties in all the different areas. So were the police, but the more time that passes, the more scared you get, because a lot of these cases do not end well when a lot of time passes. They did have this GoFundMe page set up. I'm not entirely, probably to cover, you know, Keith won't have gone to work, so he's got to cover everything because of that. Anyway, the donations came flooding in. Everyone wanted to try and help the best that they could. They looked into Sherri's phone, like her last few phone calls were made to 2 ex-boyfriends or a friend or something like that. Looked into them, didn't get anywhere. They obviously looked into Keith as well, because a lot of the times it's the husband or the wife, sadly. As scary as that thought is, it normally is. Now they did a, what's that test called? That just is pointless. Oh yeah, a polygraph. They did a polygraph on him. That's proved that he was telling the truth, even though they're not admissible in court. There you go. Don't really like those tests, but that's just my opinion. He did have an alibi too, and they did rule Keith out as a suspect in his wife's, I don't know, kidnapping? Murder? Who knows at this point? They don't really have much information on it. Obviously, they were suspecting foul play. Sherri could have just walked away, but everyone was saying that she was such a devoted mum, yada yada, that, you know, she wouldn't have done that. And so they were thinking it was more foul play. Then we get to Thanksgiving morning and a woman calls the police. She is called Andrea Sutton. Basically, her and her daughter were on a long drive. It was the early hours of the morning, it was still dark, and they spotted a woman behaving frantically. She had actually driven past her, pulled over, and phoned the police. The police came, and they found that this woman was Sherri Papini. She was found 150 miles away from where she'd actually gone missing. She was covered in bruises, had chains around her waist, and had lost a lot of weight. She had long blonde hair before she sort of went missing. This had been chopped off, and she'd even been branded on her right shoulder. Yes, branded. Obviously, Sherri was injured, bruised, battered, but at least she was alive. You know, a lot of these cases end in such sadness and tragedy, and everyone was so thankful that she'd come back relatively unscathed. So there was a big celebration that Sherri was back. Of course there was. The police wanted to speak to her and interview her because they wanted to find out what she knew, if she knew anything, who had done this to her. Sherri was very hesitant about that. But what she did is she told Keith information that Keith would then pass on to the police. She said that obviously she went out for a jog. An SUV sort of pulled up and then stopped and then was sort of beside her, and that is when 2 Hispanic women ordered her to get into their car. Now they had a gun, so she did what she was told. She got into their car. She said that they then put a bag over her head, so obviously she couldn't really describe the car very well. She did say that it felt like she went up like a dirt road kind of thing, and then that they opened a gate, so it was obviously a dirt road up leading to a gate, and then she had to walk up some steps to get inside of wherever she was. She described some of the house. She said that they allowed her to do certain things, didn't allow her to do others, like she had to pee in a cat litter tray. But they allowed her to have a shower, which is a bit odd in the first place, because why would you want to clean up someone's pee in a cat litter tray when you're going to let them go up to the bathroom and have a shower? Doesn't really make sense to me, but there you go, that's what she said. And that was pretty much all she said initially, but as time went on, she slowly sort of passed Keith more and more information to give to the police. Don't know if you're allowed to do that. Like, surely you're supposed to speak to the police? Am I wrong on that? I don't know. Anyway, the more information she gave, it allowed the police to come up with a composite sketch, which they did, of 2 Hispanic females, and this was then released out into the public and into the news. She also then remembered that about the phone, you know, when these people sort of came up on her and pulled the gun out, she said that she threw the phone on the floor and ripped out her own hair, because right, so for example, nobody's grabbed her. So if you imagine that somebody grabs her by the hair or something, rips them out, and maybe rips the headphones out of her head and she drops the phone, that's why this hair lying on the floor. But she didn't really give an explanation as to why this hair was here. So she basically said that because, as well, her story, the women put a gun to her and she just got in the car. There was no hair pulling or anything like that. So what she actually said was, when these people pulled up, she ripped out her own hair and threw her phone and headphones on the floor so that when Keith came looking for her, he would know something was wrong. It's pretty quick thinking and quick action, if you ask me. And if I was a kidnapper, which I'm not and never will be, but if you put yourself in that situation, if you was holding a gun to someone and you saw her rip out her own hair and throw her phone on the floor, surely you would have picked that up and stopped her from doing that. Is that just me? I don't know. But yeah, that's what she said. She said during the time that she was held captive, they would feed her once a day. Sometimes she would only get like apples or rice or tortillas, things like that, you know, not a lot. And she had, you know, drastically lost weight, so that accounted for that. She was never essayed, but they did beat her often, which is why she was covered in bruises and injuries and whatever else. And also the branding. I believe she had a couple of stories for the branding. Like on one occasion she said that they were going to sell her to these men and they wanted her branded and something else. I can't remember what the other ones were, but she had a couple of stories for the branding, which is, excuse me, a bit obscure as to why that changed. Then they got onto the subject of how the heck did you get out? Well, apparently they just released her. Apparently she said she heard the two females arguing. There was a gunshot. One of the females then came around, bundled her into the car, drove her to wherever and dropped her off. She had something over her head as well, so she couldn't see anything. I believe she had her hands tied behind her back, or so she said, and then she struggled to get them around the front because when she was found, her hands were like around the front of her. She then bit through those cable ties that were tying her hands, and then she ran around, wailing around for traffic and for somebody to eventually find her. So police were doing everything they could to try and find these two Hispanic women who had kidnapped Sherri Papini. They took Sherri's clothes, they sent them off for testing, and something strange came back from them because Sherri only ever mentioned two Hispanic women, right? Well, it was pretty strange that when her clothes DNA came back, they found DNA of a man. Where on earth's that come from? Then it started coming out that Sherri had previous history with like lying and things like that. Her first husband came forward and said that she was a liar a lot of the time. She'd actually accused her mother had been hurting her when in fact Sherri had actually been self-harming and blaming it on her mother. Her events of what happened seemed to change a lot. Like I said, the branding, I remembered the other ones actually. She once said that it was for some guy that she was going to get sold to, I assume. And then on another occasion she said it was a punishment for trying to escape. So everything kept changing, her story kept changing all the time, and that is not right. Definitely. So this case happened in 2016, and I believe 2017 is when they managed to get the male's DNA off of her clothes. It would take another year for them to put that through sort of genealogy databases before they found a match for this male's DNA. They found a familial match, and it belonged to James Reyes. Now, he was described as a very nice guy. He didn't have any history of anything, and so they found it strange as to why his DNA was on Sherri, especially since she said it was two Hispanic women, like I said, who did this to her. So they wanted to figure out why his DNA was on Sherri, and so they went round to his house to speak to him. Before they went around to speak to him, I believe they got a bottle as well of something he'd drunk to just definitely confirm that it was him. And they dug into his background a bit, and they found out that he was actually one of Sherri's ex-boyfriends. They had even been engaged at one point, but then their relationship had ended many, many years ago, and that was that. So, police went to speak to him. He didn't really give too much away initially, but then he started to sing like a bird. Straight away, he said that he'd basically found some things of Sherri's because they'd not spoken in years. He managed to get in touch and then mailed them to her parents' house or something like that, and that is how they began speaking again. This is when Sherri began sharing things with him, saying that she was in a relationship, well, a marriage with Keith, and he was abusive towards her, which there's no evidence that he ever was at all. But there is evidence of Sherri being a liar. So there's that. So she was going on about all this all the time, and basically James just wanted to help a friend out. So Sherri sort of manipulated him and convinced him to come and collect her. She formed an entire plan. She told him to rent a car under a different name, which he did. He got a friend to rent a car for him. He then drove that car all the way down to where Sherri lived, which is not around the corner from him. She then chucks the phone, rips her hair out, chucks the phone down, and gets in his car willingly, bearing in mind. He then took her back to his house. She picked up the room that she wanted to sort of be in and told him to move out all his furniture. She ended up sleeping in his bed and he took the sofa. Nothing sexual ever happened. She was there. And they think that this is where they got the DNA from, it transferred over from her being in his house willingly. She began sending him out things. She started cutting her hair. She started starving herself. Therefore, she would lose weight. And she also started to injure herself. She would hit herself against the bathtub. I believe I've probably got this slightly wrong, but she ran into something. I don't know whether it was ice hockey puck cue or it was some sort of sporting thing, I think, that she just ran into and smacked her head off, kind of thing, to cause more bruises. She told him to go and buy a wood burning kit, and then she told him to brand her. Yeah, she wanted to make this look legit and real. She told him to beat her up, but he wouldn't. He was like, no, I don't think so. Oh, that was it. It was a hockey stick that she ran into, and that is where she injured her nose. She had like an injury on her nose when she came back, and that's where that was from. And then on Thanksgiving morning, she told him to go out and buy some chains because she wanted to go home. She'd had enough of being away from her family, mainly her children. She missed them so much, and so she just wanted to go home. And so she made it look like a kidnapping, which she'd obviously been planning all along anyway, because she was injuring herself. And so that's what they did. He took her down to that place. He dropped her off. On the way down there, she's getting rid of things that sort of go against her, that show that she wasn't kidnapped, basically. He then went back home, and this is when Sherri begins her grand performance of how she was abducted. Even she'd slightly described bits of the house as well, and those bits of the house matched James perfectly, and what the police did in an interview with her, I found pretty damn funny, actually. It would take still another 2 years further. She wasn't actually done until March 2022, but they did an interview with her. Watch it. It's brilliant. Basically, they sit her and Keith down. They've taken photos of James' house, and they basically come in and are like, we think we've found the house that he was kidnapped in. They play along. They don't want to just... She's there of her own free will. She can leave at any time, and they tell her that. So they don't want to just go in and be like, you were kidnapped, and then she can run away. And they basically made it very clear that if you lie to us, it is a crime from the start. So they get into it. She's them showing her pictures of James's house, and she's like, oh, it looks familiar. I don't really know. And she's holding her hands in her head a lot, and like, Keith's like, yeah, we finally found the person that did this to her, because he hadn't got a clue. He don't know she faked it all, which she did. And honestly, the interview is just brilliant, because eventually when they drop the bombshell on her, that they know James has spoken about everything, they've confirmed everything, they know that she wasn't kidnapped. Keith at that point says, can I leave? And he goes out because he just can't handle it, and who can blame him? And then they land it all on her, and basically she says that she wants to go home, which of course she's free to do, and she does. But then they can arrest her because she has still been lying to the police, and they told her straight away from the beginning, you lied to us, you're getting arrested. So they later did arrest her. And not only that, like the GoFundMe page, it didn't have tons of money in. Well, it had a decent amount of money in. You know, they went and spent that. They used all the money of that and went and spent it. So she was done for fraud on that front as well. And then she ended up going to court. She pled guilty to fraud. She pled guilty to fake statements that she released. And it's really annoying because she basically accepted a plea deal, and it means that she won't serve a lot of time in jail. She does, however, have to pay back like $300,000, which is way more than she ever got, which is bloody brilliant. But it's kind of frustrating that she could fake her own kidnapping and live this life for all that time, blaming it on two poor Hispanic women. What if two women who actually looked like those sketches were caught and tried for this case? What then? Do you know what I mean? Miscarriages of justice do still happen these days, and so it's just so frustrating that she's just blaming it on two women, and when she's just done it all herself, she's just a bit loopy, if you ask me. She was 40 at the time of this happening, and I believe she got 18 months in jail, followed by 36 supervised release. That was after she admitted to everything, which, like I said, was a plea deal, which is just annoying. Apparently she was ready to repent and concede, which why would anyone fake their own kidnapping? I don't get it. She's such a dedicated mother, and yet she was missing for a long time, pretending that, putting her family through hell, putting her children through hell, her husband through hell, who, by the way, filed for divorce after that, which I don't really freaking blame him. But yeah, put everyone through hell thinking that she was kidnapped, wasted a ton of police resources, a ton of volunteers' time, a ton of people's money that they lovingly put into a fund to try and help find her, And it wasn't even real. None of it was real. It is so annoying because a lot of these cases end in such tragedy, and kidnapping cases that probably don't even get as much media attention as hers did. And hers was fake. It's annoying. But yeah, that is the end of this case. If you guys have enjoyed this video, give me a big thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel for similar content. Anyway, that's all I have today on the case of Sherri Papini, which isn't really a case at all, but it kind of is. So yeah, but it's annoying. That is the end. I've totally forgot what I normally say. So, bye!